To get started, I'm going to go back to the Northwoods. The Northwoods. So there's, in Minnesota, I've shared about this before. I feel like I'm a little bit made by these trips, and so it's kind of a common thing for me. We go up to this place called the Boundary Waters. It's between Minnesota and Canada, and it is a series of lakes and rivers and wilderness, and you don't get cell service, and you have to canoe around, and anything you bring in, you got to take out, and it's just sort of awesome. So we go up for about 5 days. I've been up a whole mess of times, and the first time I went up there, you don't know what to expect, because this could be cool, whatever. Siri thought I said her name. That's annoying. Okay. How do I stop that? I'm afraid. Okay, so anyways, first time up there, I don't know what to expect. I'm using somebody else's pack. I've got somebody else's tent. We're in somebody else's canoe, and we're just learning what to do, how to experience the wilderness in a way that we're not going to get attacked by a moose or a bear, and those things are real out there. And there's loons. The loons are awesome. Have you guys never been on a lake with a loon at night, and you just hear the loon? It's breathtaking. And so I'm learning how to do this, and we go with the first trip, and it's awesome. And we go into, there's an entry point at Little Indian River Sioux, which is the entry point is just where you put your canoe on, and it's just literally in the middle of the woods, this little sign, and you just put your canoe on the water in the sign, and we get in the boat, you got all your stuff, you got your pack, you got all the food you're going to eat, you've got everything is in this bag, and you just canoe up the river, and you get to a portage, and when you get to a portage, you get out, and you try to get out, and we went with some teenagers, and one of the guys hadn't grown into his body yet, if that makes sense. Sometimes teenage boys can be kind of clumsy, and so he gets on out. He thinks I'm out. I'm standing up, and he just rips the canoe, and I'm in the water, and this kind of thing happens a lot, but you wear clothes for that, and you don't bring your cell phone because you can't get it wet. Anyways, now I guess you can kind of now, whatever. Anyway, so at the time, you couldn't. So I learned over the course of the week how to do things. Every time somebody was doing something, I was watching, and then the next time we went up, we just did it the same way because the system works. And so everybody on our trip had the same bags because these are the waterproof bags that you can fit the most stuff in. They're the most comfortable to carry. So everybody that goes on this trip, this is part of our little group here, there's about 10 of us that would, over the years, some would go some years, whatever, but there's about 10 people, and one of them would, if you're going to buy a bag, you guys are crazy. I just said it, bag. How am I supposed to say it? And so if you're going to buy one, you buy this certain one. It's waterproof, and it rolls up, and if you put a little bit of air in it, it floats if you go overboard. And so, perfect. It's perfect for a canoe trip. And so that's the one that you buy. And then there's certain canoes that you use. And these paddles work better than those paddles, and we know that in our group, so we all use the same paddles. And then when you get to a portage, you do that the same way every time. So you get off, and then you carry the canoe first. You come back, and you grab your sack, and you bring that, and you take that back while you're carrying the paddles and do the whole thing. And that's how you do a portage, and because that's the right way we've learned to do it on our little group. And when you get to the campsite, there's an order of things. You set up your tent first, and that's how we learned that we did it. And so you set up your tent first, and you make sure everything, in case it rains, you get everything up. Then you set up the tarp, and then you have your stove, and you set up all the stuff, and you do it all the same way because this is the way we've learned, and it's right. How many of you know Zach Hepner? Zach Yerrick. Zach Hepner has also been on this trip with me, but Zach Yerrick. He's part of our church as we were growing. He moved him and his family moved from Wisconsin to us here, or from Wisconsin with us here. He's now moved back to Minneapolis, and we brought him once, and we got to the first portage, and Zach didn't take his pack off. He just left it on, threw the canoe over his head, rested the canoe right on his pack. I was like, what are you doing? We take our packs off before we carry the canoe? He said, no, I mean, my pack isn't that heavy. I didn't pack a ton of extra stuff, or I didn't pack any heavy food or anything. So it's kind of light, and when I put the canoe on it can just rest right on my pack. And now I've got all these straps and everything strapping the canoe up so I don't have to carry it on my shoulders or all this. I was like, that actually looks pretty comfortable. So we do the first short portage as a short portage. And I watched him, because he was carrying it in front. I watched him, because I carry it from the back. You can't carry one of these canoes by yourself, so I'm carrying it from the back. He's in the front. I'm like, he looks comfortable. He's like, got his hands free. He like grabs his water bottle, takes a drink while we're portaging. I'm like, this guy's onto something. So next time, I'll leave my pack on, throw the canoe on, longer portage, so much easier. Didn't have to go take the whole thing twice. Didn't have to take everything off, grab the canoe, put it back, take the walk back, grab the stuff, bring it back. It's a 5-hour canoe paddle trip that we made in like 3.5 hours because we didn't have to do it twice. That got me to thinking, because you're in the woods and you have no cell phone service, and it's only the same people that are out there, and it's just kind of, you have all day to do nothing. That got me to thinking about how many things on this trip do I do because that's how I was showed it, that's how our community does it. But an outside voice might be able to help me with some things. And then I got to thinking, maybe not just the canoe trip, but what about my life? How many things in my life do I do because that's how my tribe does it? Gosh. How many things in my life do I do because that's just how we do it around here? And a better question, how many things in my life am I not letting other people give me input in because that's how I do it around here? How many people, like, I could be honest with you, the first time we went on this canoe trip, I was thinking, why are they taking their packs off? They could just carry the pack and the canoe. And I asked them about it, and they said, oh, it's too heavy. And I was like, makes sense. Accepted. But I was wrong. And I didn't try it. Anyways, I want to talk about today the kind of family, the kind of community, the people that God is building here. And what I really want to talk about is the value of, we're going to say diversity, but I don't want you to carry with that word all of the, I believe the kingdom of heaven is the most diverse place that there is. And so I believe his church should be reflective of that. The question I want to ask is, how much does the world that we live in look like us? And more than just look like us, think like us, act like us, vote like us. How much does the world we're in reflect me? Because here's my contention. I think in our communities, while we should be looking for people to help us grow, people to push us forward, people to challenge us, I think what we're looking for sometimes is people to just tell me, I got it already. I'm good. I want people who think like me. And when I tell them who I voted for, they want to tell me how right I am. And when I tell them how I feel about this thing in the news, or that thing in the news, or this issue, or that thing, or that theological issue, I just want to tell them how right I am because I'm uncomfortable with hearing that somebody else has another opinion. We have done this so poorly in the church. And this is, I'm included in this. I'm not casting this on somebody else. We've done this so poorly in the church that we are now named we are named for our differences, the things that divide us. And I don't want that anymore. I want to be a Christian church. I want to be a place where if you are a Pentecostal theology, or if you have a Baptist theology, or a Wesleyan theology, or a Presbyterian theology, like if you can come to this place and say, I love Jesus. We are saved by grace alone, through faith alone. The Bible's true. The Holy Spirit indwells us. Jesus paid for my sins on the cross. We can agree on the basic things. I want this to be a place where the rest of that stuff is not just tolerated, but celebrated. My dream of a church isn't a place where you come and we make carbon clones of me to walk around and carry my message. That is absolutely disgusting to me. I feel like a little sick thinking about people walking around trying to be like me. But I want to be a place where we can explore and learn together to try to be like Jesus. Let's go to that verse in Revelation that I put in Revelation 7. I want you guys to see this. John is seeing a crazy vision, and we don't have time to go through it, but this is what he sees, is at the end of all things, this is what he sees. He says, after this I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands. And they were shouting with a great roar. Say a great roar. Salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb. This is the vision I have for Cornerstone Church here in Virginia Beach. Is that if we are the people that come together and say salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb, and we all together from every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every socioeconomic class, every racial way we try to divide ourselves and all that stuff, I want us to all come together and say it comes from him. And I want our church to look on earth as the church looks in heaven. I don't want this to be a white church. I don't want this to be a black church. That'd be harder, being a white guy. It's kind of funny. Okay. I get it. I mean, I know. I don't want this to be a rich church or a poor church. I don't want this to be a liberal church. I don't want this to be a conservative church. I don't want this to be I want this to be a church of people who have laid beside all of the things that used to define us, and now we pick up things that define us now, and it's all of us shouting with a great roar, salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb. There's a verse here in Galatians I want to read to you. Galatians 3:26 and 28 says this, for you are all children through faith in Christ Jesus. It's really good, you guys. And all who have been united with Christ in baptism have put on Christ, like putting on new clothes. There's no longer Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And now that you belong to Christ, you are the true children of Abraham. You are his heirs, and God's promise to Abraham belongs to you. There is this concept that Paul is coming from, someone who's so strongly identified with his cultural identity first. He was the Jew among Jews, which meant he was the one who studied the hardest. He put his entire life into this idea that I am the best Jew on the planet. I'm the foremost. He put himself into this idea of the Pharisees, like I'm the Pharisee of Pharisees. I did everything right on the law. Celebrate me based on my culture. And he said he lays it all down. There's no longer Jew or Gentile. It doesn't exist, not here in the family in the house of God. Because we all come to God in faith, and we come and in this place, in this house, I don't know what it's like out there, but in this place, in this house, we are all the children of God. We're all the heirs of God. There's nothing that separates us. So you came here poor, welcome to the family. You stand equal at the table. You sit in the same places as the rest of us, and that came here with more or that came here with less. I just so strongly want this church, and I want the church to show what it can look like for people to lay down the things that we think divide us and take up the thing that unites us in Jesus. Is this good? Is this helpful? Double it. I'll read this from Colossians 2. I wasn't planning on, but let's do it. Colossians 3, 5 through 11. So put to death all these things that we think we carry, sinful, earthly lurking things within you, have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of the world. Because of these sins, the anger of God is coming. Verse 7 says this: you used to do these things when your life was still a part of this world. Oh, we're seeing that delineation we saw last week between this world and the kingdom. You used to act this way when your life was part of this world, but now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you've stripped off your old sinful nature and its wicked deeds. And this is where it gets really good. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like Him. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters, and He lives in all of us. Christ is all that matters, and He lives in all of us. I want you to think about the community that Jesus built when He was here, his 12 disciples. He had somebody called Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were this far right, leaning, politically charged group who wanted the Hebrew people to rise up and overthrow their rulers in Rome. He was a very politically, and so he was one of the disciples. And then there's some kind of backwoods country boys from Galilee, which is north, close to where Jesus was from, and they were just fishermen. That young fishermen guys who decided that they're going to come alongside them. So him and Simon probably not, those guys, Peter, James, John, Andrew, those guys probably are not really, it would have to be Jesus who brought them together. And there's this guy named Matthew Levi. Matthew Levi wrote the book, Matthew, and he was a tax collector. The scene at the time, imagine how you feel about the IRS. But then imagine the IRS is part of, that the agents who collect your taxes are like part of your group. Like you're our people. So the people that collected taxes from the Jews were Jewish, but they didn't just collect the taxes they were supposed to collect. They collected a little extra on top. And so imagine that kind of, I don't like paying taxes anyways. I really hate when people steal from me, and I really hate when it's people who are supposed to be with me. So that was Matthew, and he's part of the team now too. So there's these things, there's real divisions, cultural, politically, ideologically, real divisions, but they come together and follow Jesus because Christ is all that matters, and He lives in us all. Let's go to Acts 13. Among the prophets and teachers of the church at Antioch of Syria were Barnabas, who we know is a young Jewish man who would follow Paul kind of around the world, around the known world at the time. They were linked up, and so him and Paul were very kind of similar, but he would have been younger. And Simeon, who was called the black man because he was a black man. Lucius, who's from Cyrene, which is now not from the normal, he's Greek, but not from the normal Greek world. It's from this place called Cyrene. And Manaen, who's the childhood companion of King Herod Antipas. So this rich kid, Roman, and Saul, who is Paul. And look at this diversity we see in the leadership of the church in Antioch, which is crossing all sorts of borders and barriers for the time. This is not normal. People's primary identity was their cultural identity. This is not normal. To the point where Jesus went through Samaria. Didn't go to Syria. He comes through Samaria, and they're not even supposed to walk there. He's not supposed to have the conversation he had with a woman who was sitting at the well, But he did, because he's breaking down the male-dominated society, and he's breaking down the Jews don't interact with these dirty Samaritan people. So he's breaking down that. And then at the end of this discourse, he says, he's in Samaria. He's standing in Samaria. He says, look at the harvest. It is ripe. To his disciples, the ones who would never have walked there had they had their choice. The community that Jesus is building is far, far, far more concerned with helping people than who the world says that they are. Because when we come to Christ, Christ is all that matters, and Christ is in all of us. The thing that we have done a great job in a lot of things here in our growth, and I think as we've been growing and over the last year, one thing I want to make sure that our church reflects is the kingdom of heaven. I've had more than one person come to our church, say that, I don't think I fit here. I'm too old, or I don't think I fit here. I don't dress right, or I don't, and that, like, those things, if somebody came in here and said, I think you're teaching heresy, whatever, I could deal, that's water up, I could deal with that. I know that's coming. But for somebody to come here and feel like they don't fit because of what the world says they are out there breaks my heart. So, Caleb, what do we do with this? What do we do with this? There's two kind of applications here. The first one to me is in our own lives. We think about who we're carrying our canoes with. Let's think about who we carry our canoes with. If everybody that's in our group thinks like us, talks like us, votes like us, we are going to have a very, very narrow worldview. How many people do you know well and you hate? For most of us, that list hopefully is very short. That's my point. But how many people that we don't know well, whole people groups sometimes, do we have negative feelings about or towards? The idea is this: we need to move close. Our lives should be intersecting with people who don't look like us, don't think like us. Because if we don't, two things happen. The first is we limit our own perspective of ourselves. We stop growing. Our community should be a place where we are able to grow. This community should be a place where we're able to grow in our faith, grow and become more like Jesus. But if only people around us agree with us, none of their things that God would change in us will change. Because if everybody thinks like us, there's no challenge. We have to celebrate the people in our lives that challenge us because they think a little different. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, if we continue to live our lives, me included, primarily surrounded by people who only think like us, vote like us, listen to the music I listen to, wear the clothes that I wear, all that stuff, like, if that's our moving forward, we will only be able to reach with the gospel. And this is the real price. We'll only be able to reach with the gospel the people who think like us, look like us, vote like us. And I'm here to say that it's only Christ that matters, because Christ is in all of us. That's my point. That's the first thing that we need to work on in our own lives. The second thing is I want us to, as a church, be praying for more people to come to this place who we disagree with in theological areas, who look different than us, who are in a different age bracket than us. And you run a line here, and there's a thought about, is this diversity for diversity's sake? Or are you just trying, is this like whatever? But I just want you to so clearly understand that I see the Bible and I see what heaven looks like, and then I see what our church is. Looks like. I don't want the divisions that exist out there to exist in here. Because that's our old life. As we come to faith, all that disappears. And so as I look at the church I see, and as we're moving forward, and I think about what God would have this place be, is that it's not a white church or a black church. It's not a Pentecostal church or what. I want a place where all people can come together. In Jesus' name. I want to create a culture here in this family that doesn't just allow for differences, but celebrates them. And as a church family, as people of faith, we can do one of two things. We can build barriers, or we can build bridges. I want to be a person who lays his life down to be a bridge for people to come to faith. That will feel like getting walked on sometimes because bridges get walked on. You want God to use you, you better be ready to feel used. It's not always comfortable, and not every idea, but at the end of the day, when we press forward to become all things to all people. But remember, we go back, Paul said, I owe nothing to anyone, but I have become a slave to all. I owe nothing to anyone. It's not, I don't owe this, there's nothing on my life that other than I watched Jesus lay his life down for me. I can't help but do the same. This is all about reaching the nations. It's all about reaching our city. Creating a place where no matter what you look like, what your past was, how you think, whatever that is, there's a bridge here for you to find faith and to grow to become more like Jesus. We're all on a journey, and I want as many people to be on this journey as we can.